on the various Victims of Crime Acts and the fund in particular, because it was a very exciting day for me when I was working for the Advisory Council on Women's Issues, and we all came over, the chairwoman of the council, a number of the appointed council members, and myself as executive director, to listen to, I'm pretty sure it was the Honourable Elaine McCoy, now a senator, who was then the Minister of Justice, perhaps, and she announced this Victims Fund. And at that time, it would have been the Victims Programs Assistance Fund. And we were very excited because it was going to allow that women who were victims of what we now call family violence, was called domestic abuse then, I think, would be able to access some of the funds in here. And actually, since then, this fund has paid for various programs that were offered by sexual assault centres, you know, for a court assistance program and some counselling services, and it's done some good work. I have been critical of it because the program stockpiled an enormous amount of money in my belief. It had quite a surplus. It may still have quite a surplus. I haven't recently checked, actually. But I felt that that money should not be sitting there. I think the first time I looked at it was when I was the Solicitor General and Justice Critic, somewhere between 01 and 04, I think. And it had, I don't know, $3 or $4 million in it. But at that time, you know, that was still a chunk of change that could have been going out to victims of violence. And I think the last time I looked, it was in the 35 million or 40 million range. So a significant amount of money that was not going out to victims of crime or victims of violence. And the excuse was always, well, you know, the money for this fund comes from levy on provincial and federal fines. And it gets collected and gets sent off, I think, and then it finally comes back to the province. And the reasoning always given to me was, well, we don't want to spend the money because we don't know how much is actually going to come back to us once everybody takes their cut. But I felt that they really did have an ongoing surplus that should have been addressed. So to see this come up again for this Victims of Crime Amendment Act come up again, of course, piqued my interest, because this is no longer the fund that I sat in the audience with such excitement awaiting the launching of. It was replaced by the Victims of Crime Act in November of 1997. So I was actually elected by the time that came into being. So it's always been administered by the Solicitor General. What we're looking, what this amendment is looking to do, we're told, is to clarify processes for applying for financial benefits, set out the details of the reviews of decisions or applications, so the sort of appeal process there, and make sure that they're consistent with procedures that are used in other administrative tribunals, and remove some of the powers of the review boards, particularly calling witnesses. Now, my colleagues already talked about that, so I'm not going to go over it again. What I am concerned about here is and God bless them, they have finally done what I have complained about for years. So under Section 1B, which is under Section 2, I'm sorry, Section 2 of the Act is repealing Section 1B in the original Act, in which child includes an illegitimate child, which I was always really offended by, because I don't see how any child could be illegitimate. I know there was a legal definition that was very commonly in use. I'm just offended by it. I think every child is legitimate. How could you possibly put a stamp on some kid's forehead and say, thank you, my colleague's trying to keep me from getting on a rant here. In that times have changed, and we no longer separate and categorize children based on the marital status of their parents. And that, to me, is very appropriate. But I do note that that is now being changed in April of 2011. It took us a while to get there. And I'm shocked sometimes by how long it takes us to get to do some things that seem pretty self-evident. So a pat on the back to the Solicitor General for finally removing that. Thank you very much, and it has been duly administered on my behalf by the Minister for Seniors. Thanks for getting to that. I just wish it hadn't taken us until 2011 to do it, but pat on the back for taking that out, so we no longer distinguish between children and illegitimate children. Thank you for that.